Okay, today we're going to talk about um, how many different approaches are using the shadow these days as a new concept that they incorporate into their own systems they have developed, and we want to focus on the fact that there might be something wrong with this because they are using the philosophy of Jung in a way that is the opposite of what is actually meant. And it's in surface now, the concept of the shadow and the unconscious is now in surface of other approaches. For instance, somebody put video on your Facebook from Ken Wilber, and in that he explains a dream, and in the dream there's a monster, and he explains how you have to interpret that. Could you explain a little bit more about the the trend?
Yes, indeed. What we're seeing is that many approaches have, I think, because they have been confronted with the fact that they have, in a way, omitted the problem of the shadow, and that these Eastern approaches, which you also find it in the church, that their approaches without dealing with the shadow properly are really not going to take them where they are pretending to be going. Many have started to incorporate the whole issue of the shadow, and indeed the question becomes if this is being done in the right way. And my opinion is that it's not, and um, it really boils down to, for instance, in the case of the church, the shadow can be the Bible and the biblical teachings can be, as it were, translated into the whole language of the shadow, but then the shadow is then still being put in service of the religious doctrine. So they're using the shadow work to further and foster their own agendas. It's not really a um, approach where you really honor the work of the shadow first and foremostly. And it's really thinking about it. It really started in when Jung was collaborating with the Catholic priest called Father White, and you can find um, the letters of Jung and White published. And there's a book called I don't recall exactly, but there's this book of their correspondence that I have. And this Father White went on to even publish a book on called God and the Unconscious. And in any case, what happened there is in a way also very similar, because the Father White became a Jungian analyst and used to do his pastoral counseling with Jungian work, a method, and he was a close friend to Jung. But the point, when the point was reached of whether he would choose, let's call it for Jung or for the church, he chose for the church. He could not stand up for Jung, and because to really understand the problem of the shadow would have, let's call it like, let's say, would have devastating consequences on the teachings of the church. So you get that, and then he turned on Jung, and Jung was very, very sad about this, and it really hurt Jung. But because Jung had put a lot of time into Father White and into coaching him and into teaching him, and I think this really goes indeed to the essence of it, because you see, we can like in the case of Ken Wilber, his work was heavily criticized by the Jungian people. I have a personal friend that wrote several articles about how Ken Wilber does not include the problem of the shadow and the feminine, and then this led to a kind of a correspondence between them. And I personally think that it's out of these that out of this type of critique on his work that he incorporated the whole idea of the shadow, because it's because he could not do it, because it boils down to what I've spoken in the past, that meditation, Eastern meditation, does not deal with the problem of the shadow. And in this video called Casting Shadow of Ken Wilber, he admits it. He says that the whole idea of enlightenment and going to these higher non-dual levels of awareness, if not if done on a foundation in which the shadow is not dealt with, will not hold. And this is why I was very interested in making a comment on this video, because in this very video he does an exercise in which he shows how to deal with the shadow via a dream example. And but in the very act of doing that, he is rejecting the shadow.
Yeah, he is, because he is explaining this dream and emotions that are coming from these dreams, and he's laughing about it like he's doing some comic show. And he goes into a stand-up comedy almost, explaining the shadow, and which is the piece that he has not included in his work, and he's now makeshifting it in something to include it, because he cannot. He admits that without adjust learning about the shadow, or learning individual has to learn about one's shadow, because you cannot reach, or you can well, I don't know if you can reach enlightenment or not, but it will hit you down just as fast if you're not aware of. Well, he doesn't speak of awareness even, so but and then he says that when you wake up from this dream, and yeah, the dream was of a big monster, and you wake up and you feel fear. Then you sit down and you feel fear, 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 and then everybody starts to laugh. And then he goes on, yeah, he says, fear is not an authentic emotion. And then it just goes totally wrong from there.
No, exactly, and that's why this is exactly the problem, because he what you're saying is that he doesn't strike the right tone with the work. It's the laughing and the comedy aspect, comedy-ish way it's brought, and the idea of that, making, in a way, making fun of the idea that you should, that the fear that fear could be the shadow that you are rejecting, repressing, and that's it, and all of that. Yes, this is the whole feeling to it strikes one as not authentic, or not and the point is indeed that and I want to really get into the dream in a little while also, and say and explain and share what my interpretation, how I would look at that dream in terms of the shadow work. Because but I just wanted to also say that this is a very widespread problem, you see, because, and I have a lot of personal feelings about it also, because I've been coaching a lot of people, and many people come to the table of working with the shadow with other practices. Almost everybody is busy with other practices. Some are busy with Reiki, some with regression hypnotic therapy, some with um, very biblical. You know, some people are really into the Bible, and then they into the doctrine of the church. Then, so then they fall in a way, they fall for the whole idea of the shadow, and they see how important it is. But when the point comes, just like with Father White, that you have to really go to the depths and understand the meaning of it, and then almost always, what you find is that you have to. A point comes in which you have to make a choice, because the what Jung understood, Jung wrote a whole book on applying the problem of the shadow to the Bible, and the Vatican was vehemently against it, because you see, Jung would talk about the shadow of the God figure in the Bible, and and he would touch some very sacred cows. So that is where, and in all these areas, you find it. Like this Ken Wilber is really a transcendental psychologist, and he,
which is an Eastern practice.
in essence, right, because he really,
I think that the problem is here that the Eastern practice doesn't really deal with the inner conflict of a personal of an individual psyche. They just go like, for us Westerners, they just go over it,
right,
and you just step up, you transcend and you transmute, and the whole dualism is gone,
exactly,
and then you just don't even deal with psyche.
right, and that's the whole thing. That's the essence of it, because the Eastern approach is really based on a psyche that hasn't been split in the way we have been split. And then you have to understand the whole idea of history and the development of history, the time of Buddha, and especially in the East, they did not experience the development that we experience in terms of the ego and in terms of individualism and the split of the mind. So these practices do not address this, and one for one, you will see that all of these Eastern approaches have been brought to the West, but they do not deliver what they promise, because the mind remains split. So the whole idea of the Jungian idea of the idea of the core of the Jungian thing is that there is this basic conflict in the mind, and the non-dualists, I've had encounters with many of them, and in the beginning they also are talking the talk. No, yes, the shadow, and it's important that we know this, and we know that without the shadow, but it's all really lip service, because um,
You got huge gaps,
well,
like Ken Wilber says, just per definition, the premise is, fear is not an emotion. It's not an authentic emotion.
exactly, and you get the problem with the issue is also that you get that they want to be freed from the conflict without really dealing with it. And this is why the real imagery surrounding the shadow work is not enlightenment. It's the cross. If you want, it's the bearing of that cross. It's the very it's the very hellish, difficult problem of containing the opposites and not letting one side take over. So this is why, um, and we believe that when you contain the opposites, that out of that struggle, that something new is birthed. But it's not the idea of looking for non-dualism. No, the dualism is sacred. Is the crucible to reach to the next level. You see, so this is why the non-dualists would include the shadow, but they would include it in like as a supplement
You have
to
to enforce That you can go beyond it,
Yes,
but
and
not really
no,
dealing with it.
and to supplement the meditation and the whole idea of transcendence, but it's not the main menu. And this is the same thing I've found with people I've worked with that basically are wedded to the church and are basically priests. They will not let go of their the church teachings, no matter how much they um, no matter how much they want to work with the whole shadow work. And
Well, obviously, the feeling is that something is lacking because they cannot reach the people.
right,
So then they think, okay, it
yes,
must be something that this intangible thing, the shadow.
right. And I
But the point is that they don't mix.
no, because well, this I've spoken about this once in another way. The spiritualists, which are like the transcendentalists, they're dealing with spirits. They're not dealing with psyche. And then you have the real psychologists that deal with the psyche, the inner life, but they often omit the spiritual side also. That needs to be said. But the the real thing is to do justice to both. And Ken Wilber is trying to, I would say, do that, but not really in terms of understanding the real necessity of the shadow work. It's more like, I mean, I've had this many times in my life in which I have critiqued a model. I used to do research in Holland on leadership, and then when I critiqued the model to a point where was this was the time when I was developing the whole idea on the observer problem, the observation problem. And when I showed them, for instance, that you cannot um, measure a leader, the traits of a leader via the observations of the follower, which is the way they were doing it, because what you're getting is projections, and not the leader as such. The whole idea of beauty is in the eye of the beholder. This was supposed to um, lead to a new model where we would go more Jung, more in terms of Jung, will work more with with projections and all of that. And what did they do? This was a huge. This is, as we speak, still one of the biggest researchers in the world. They took it and they tried to use it in order to reformulate their model in a way as to make themselves immune for that criticism.
Right.
It was not the real truth and sincere approach to saying, you know what, yes, maybe our model is wrong. This whole idea of the shadow and the touching of the shadow is not just another theory. It's really, I think, the next step that we have to take as people in the West to get out of the mess. And it's not the non-dualists, which are basically applying Eastern philosophy, Eastern methods. They are going. They want to get out of this level of the conflict, but not by addressing it. And I think actually, I actually really we have reasons to believe, because I do most of my research via dreams, that um, to go into the whole idea of the church, and that it's that what the message, what if, let's just say, call this person Jesus or whoever. What we have been able to track, and Jung is the one that showed this, is that every 2,000 years, for every new aeon, you get like a new template of this in terms of the journey of the self. So every 2,000 years, like, the self has to undergo another transformation. These are the big stages of consciousness. So every 2,000 years, you could say that someone comes, as it were, to be like a template, to model the template for the coming 2,000 years. And so, in that sense, you could say that the Nazarene or Jesus, actually, what he really came with was this work of the shadow, because you could see Pisces as the two fishes, and the 2,000 years of Pisces is the 2,000 years of Christianity. And this is why Jesus was always represented as a fish, and he would call the apostles they would say they were fishermen of people, because they had to fish the people out of the sea, which is the unconscious. So personally, I think first I think the church took that message but used it in a completely inverted way in terms of how to not carry the shadow, because the church in a nutshell would say, put your burden on Jesus. Let Jesus will carry your shadow for you. So that's basically what all these practices do, and that is they're all ways to not carry your own burden. And this is also the way the Western person, not the Eastern, the Western person would use meditation as a way to escape that conflict with yourself. And so this is why I think that the whole work of the shadow has not only been boycotted, for obfuscated, meaning they've tried to hide it, or and to make to ill use it, because I think that this is the only way to really get out of.
This would be the next step.
Yes, so there is a much bigger interest than just a few individuals that are thinking, let me. Yes, I need to incorporate the shadow into my model, but I cannot admit that the 15 books that I sold were all wrong. So I have to put it in there like a supplement, but I'm really not interested in that level of the work. But I think so. It's not only a few individuals. It's not only a few people like Betty Ford and Deepak Chopra who have never ever done anything with the shadow, jumping on the bandwagon because all of a sudden it has become kind of quite popular, the whole thing of the shadow work. But I think that there is a much greater interest in suppressing the work of the shadow, because that is the only work that is really going to, what I call, create true healing in the self. So let me give you an example, if you want to.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So in a moment, I just want to go show the listener that the way Ken Wilber interprets the dream, and in terms of the shadow, because his video is about the shadow and how I would interpret it. Because so there's this big monster in the dream, and then what he says is this: he says the dreamer is experiencing obviously fear by seeing this monster, but he says, but the fear is an inner authentic emotion, and it's not really the fear that is important in that sense, but that it's the rage of that monster that you are repressing, that you should own. So he interprets the monster as the rage in yourself that you are rejecting, and then he's coaching or coaxing you to then own and feel that fear, that rage. While I would interpret it in the following way: I would say that the monster has been conjured up into your dream because by day you have been too much in rage, and then the monster is there to give you some fear in order to compensate the too much rage by day. So, so notice very subtly, Ken Wilber is in a way re-engineering the dream, and this is what many people do that are working with the shadow, is that they want to almost like you almost also find this in terms of lucid dreaming. They want to re-engineer the dream. They're not really taking the dream for what it is. So what you get then is that Wilber would say, oh no, the fear in the dream is not important. It's the rage of the, so no, the dream, if you really, so what I've learned is that you need to really, this is why all of the whole practice of lucid dreaming in terms of trying to control your dreams by awakening in them, and all of these practices are anti-shadow work, because the dream is supposed to change you. So what Wilbur is saying is, one, the fear is an inauthentic feeling. It's about the rage. And then he says then you need to take the rage and transmute it again as another changing of the basic raw dream into some higher wisdom. And meaning that, but the point is that in my terms, it would be that the monster is making you fearful because you are too rageful by day. And I have seen this in hundreds of dreams. Whenever someone is too much in the yang, meaning too fiery, too feisty, or too rage, too mad, angry by day, they will encounter in their dreams situations that are going to put them into the side that they by day are rejecting, which is the fear. Because when you're very angry, it's because you're deep down afraid and you're covering that up. You see, so what you would get then is that no, that monster is there to make you feel what you by day are rejecting, which is the fear. So you need some of that fear. So to call fear an inauthentic feeling would be, and this is why I wanted to comment on this, is perfectly illustrates how the feminine, which is the yin side, which is the fear, is represented as inauthentic. And that's the way the shadow is being repressed here in the very presentation that is saying that if we repress the shadow, then the whole idea of enlightenment with all of these techniques of meditation will fall into nothing. You see, and this is where what I found is that so many people that are tampering with dreams of others in terms of the shadow work are really coaching them into repressing the shadow. And the more you repress the shadow, the more you open up the lower levels, which is what we're seeing now, which makes perfect sense with, you could say, almost like a global industry and culture based on repression of the feminine and the shadow. And that is that the whole Western culture is now, I've seen hundreds of dreams of people dreaming that they're being abducted by aliens, or that they're reptiles that are stalking them in their dreams. And so in my work, there's like a filter that is supposed to filter us off from the lower levels. But by repressing the shadow, this is what is bringing in these entities. So this is why, this is the way, you see, it makes perfect sense, because if you look good at Wilber's model, his first book was called The Theory of Everything. As you shared with me earlier, his training is really as a chemist. These are all traditions that are based on the rejection of the Sophia or the feminine. So what you get these engineers really that are trying to, I would say, get into the mind and the psychological stuff, and
abuse it, really.
yes,
And then what you get is just the opposite of what Jung stood for. And you get people that are messing with other people's mind into the opposite, and then totally making it ridiculous. And they are like, I guess, just making their own market bigger and bigger because more and more people will get into trouble. And this is all because Jung was not accepted. His teachings and his philosophies said this is not of this kingdom. And then now you have people that they are, no matter what, they will keep holding on to their old systems of that are decaying and falling down and festering poverty and hunger and destruction. And people will keep holding on to this and deny the fact that the shadow is gonna destroy it all.
Yes.
And they still don't get it.
And that's it. The problem of the shadow is if you look at the symbolism of the whole aeon of Pisces, and it's all about the shadow. It's really all about these two fishes, and a lot of these. See, what happens is that when you are trained with the scientific model, you're not able to look at this what I call the pair of opposites. You see, and to get a real feel for the way these opposites play out in your life, it's not easy if you're really a scientist in terms of the science still works with individual variables, it's very particle oriented. So these guys go into this field and they really they work it like an engineer, with graphs and models and quadrants. And but you will, for instance, in Wilber then by trying to supplement his work with the shadow work, talks about these 3 steps, and it never fails in terms of number archetypes that somehow these models always end up in 3s that are based on the rejection of the feminine. These are all models. It's all the 3 is always what you call the rejection of the 4th, which is the feminine, and the 3 is the masculine. So these are really models. The whole idea of theories and simulations, and you see, if we would really surrender to the shadow, that would take us to a whole new paradigm in which we would actually go back into the real world, the real reality, versus what the techno approach is of you standing outside of the machine. It's all computers and systems outside of the person. The observer remains outside.
Yeah.
But so I made a video the other day on collective touching the shadow in terms of literally how to feel and spend time with the earth as if the earth is someone, a real being you would sit and spend time with. You see, so this would this is why I also call my method touching the shadow, which means it's not an intellectual thing. It's really touching. It's really touching. There's no other way to. You cannot put that in a model. Touching, the model will take you away from the touching, and so this is why I wanted to discuss this today, to show that. And I'm not saying this in any other way, because everybody is entitled to follow whatever they want to follow, obviously, and everybody has a basis in some practice. So it's not about telling people that they have to convert to the shadow work or anything like that. If you're called for
No, it's just, especially the opposite. Don't use it if you don't understand it, if you don't know who's the founder, if you don't know the principles, if you don't know what are archetypes, if you don't know what is self and shadow, please don't use it because you put the people on the wrong track. You're making it worse.
Yes, and this is why the the whole exactly this is why it's so important to re-emphasize that, and that is that when you reject the shadow, you are opening up doorways. This is why the whole new age is really all about connecting to spirit guides, because the new age, starting from the whole hippie movement, and many of these guys are really ex-hippies, which is all about the whole idea of blissing out. And when I say enlightenment, I mean, when I say blissing out, I mean enlightenment without the shadow.
Right.
And so all of these approaches, so they really work towards the rejection of the shadow, which opens up the doorway to the spirit guides. But these are not the spirit guides that people think they are.
They're not the masters.
No, these are other guides, that are going to guide you, which is what I call towards the singularity of the false rapture, which is a rapture towards lower a lower realm. And it makes perfect sense that the agenda would have been to create all kinds of cults, all kinds of religions, all kinds of new age practices to foster the rejection of the shadow, so that we could open up the whole doorway to these lower frequencies, and then call that the rapture. So if you put it all together, um, it makes, you see, it's, for instance, Jung really had a Jung's big awakening was that he in a dream he found himself crucified on the cross. And so Jung really realized that he was at that point, and this is my interpretation, that he was really carrying, I would say he was resurrecting this teaching that was hidden on purpose. And then Jung realized that what he was really teaching was this process of carrying the opposites, the cross. You see, if you were to realize that that monster is making you afraid because you by day are too rageful, and you realize then that obviously that monster is indeed a part of you, but that's the part of you that is coming to bring you back down because you're too up. What results from that is that you become aware that you swing from extreme insecurity and fear to this extreme rageful monster. But you need to understand this in terms of compensation. If not, you will take it that the monster is the side you need to engage more in than you already are.
Right.
And so it's the practice of containing these opposites,
Yeah.
looking at yourself, how you
Yeah.
swing in one day from extreme yang to extreme yin, and by seeing how you are really a split schizophrenic personality, we all are, and containing that when I am too angry, containing the fact that it's really deep down fear. So that's the poles that this cross symbolizes, and it's by containing that. So if anything, you would not use the word enlightenment, you would use the word crucifixion, with the great danger that the church has ill-used that, obviously, and used the whole idea of a martyr on a cross in a very wrong way. They have totally spun it. But we know that what they really did with it is they turned it upside down, because by rejecting the shadow, you activate the downward spiral, the downward spiral, and the downward spiral is now being portrayed as the upward spiral, and the rapture down to the lower levels is being portrayed as the rapture upwards, which is the great deception. And this is why so many people are now caught in not only these new age practices, but are now their deception has become obviously much more refined because now they have included shadow in these new age practices, but in service of further repression of the shadow. So I think the point that we're making is that there is a complete disregard for and disrespect for this work, and a lack of understanding, and just and maybe even what I said, that it's even being orchestrated to suppress the real nature of this work, and but we need to. So you cannot say I'm going to go to the transcendental levels, I need to reach there, and then we just do some shadow work, like some maintenance, or we got to get that done with, and then so that we can get on to the higher levels, and all of that.
Yeah, more and more and more. He's
Yeah,
saying a piece about that he has things, states categorized, and
yeah,
you got to go to the highest, and then he says, no, but it's not important to reach the highest. And
exactly. And what you get is this: you get these inflated personalities
yeah,
that feel that they are now God, in the sense that they are charting now these higher levels. And this is where it all goes wrong, because if you really humble yourself down to doing the shadow work, the next stage that comes is the stage of self, meaning you will start to realize, see in your dreams that you are playing a certain role for the right timeline. And the point becomes that once you contain the opposites, which takes you into a state of a kind of a relaxation state, to get the vision. The vision is who you are.
yeah,
This is not a vision like people in organizations think, oh, we need a vision, and a vision is something about the future, and
more.
the vision is something about goals that we have to reach in terms of customers. This is
Exponential growth.
this is a vision of yourself. Who are you? Until finding the self, you have been operating in a false self-image. This is basically what people would refer to as the ego. And when you find the self, you surrender to the self. That is a completely and totally painful and horrifying process. This is not enlightenment. To let go of the old you, which is the false you, that is false in terms of being a double personality, being the rageful side, and then on the other hand there's the side that is terrified, and then the one covering up the other. Then you get glimpses of your true self in the dreams, meaning that you are busy with a certain job, and from then on it becomes what you call surrender or belief or faith. They're not after shadow 20 levels that Mr. Wilber has set out to chart for us in terms of graphs and equations. It's then the school, the Sophia school, then you're going into a class that is going to teach you how to surrender and have faith.
Yeah, you said this earlier, that working with a shadow should lead to becoming quiet. It's a work, a process that makes you quiet. It's not like Wilber's interpretation of the dream is that you in the day you're very aggressive, and you got to be more aggressive to get that goal there, out there on Mars, so far out of space, outer space it is. Now this work does the opposite, and the opposite is that you will find peace, and that will lead to transcendental self. eventually.
Right.
But I think I'm thinking this must take another 2,000 years.
No, well, no, because yes, but no, you see, but we need to say the transcendental self. They have it again, as you said, as something external. The transcending. It's really, in Jungian terms and in my terms, it's 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 a deepening. It's not just transcending as going outside into some higher. It is going deeper into the self.
Yeah, but
It's, it,
they are constantly, this topic comes up when you listen to all these talks and articles. It's just some kind of a magic happening outside of you.
right.
It has nothing to do with inner work.
No, and this is why the whole idea is that when you get that, when you accept that, when you see that you are the monster and you are the victim in that dream that this monster is after, it gets worse before it gets better, in the sense that then you need to contain that tension, which is terrible. But once you really sit with it and see it, reflect, it's all about awareness. It's not about sitting and feeling as such. Then these two poles become closer together, and then out of that you start to get glimpses of the self with a capital S, which is the deeper self. So you go into the deeper layers of the self. We're like living now in the outer circles, spheres of the self. So it's not, the idea of transcendence has the feeling of we're going somewhere out there, as you said, with you going up to Mars or wherever. But that's the false timeline, exactly. The going inward. This is a going inward process, and you're going deeper and deeper and deeper into the true self, and then you get the self then moves in a world that is synchronistic, but it's not transcendent, as if going outside of space and time. It's going deeper into space and time to a level where everything is telepathic, non-local. See, but it's exactly the opposite. The other side is going outside. Going outside of space and time. The connotation is going beyond. Going in outer space. And this is going inwards. It's like peeling the layers off of an onion to the core. That's the diamond self, and that self moves in that self navigates on faith. Faith is, after the shadow work, the next step, not enlightenment, but faith. Then you need to learn how to believe in your vision. You're going to find in these dreams who you are and what your true vision is, and then the belief in those dreams and the putting them together realizes that into reality. And that's the process, and it's not we need to do the shadow work to then move on to 15 other stages above that, and those stages are not you cannot even graph that. There are no graphs for that. There are no structures for that. There's no what you find here is you re-entering the real. Living on the surface of the self and the earth is like living in the non-real. So this process is a return to nature, a return to the real, a return to not wanting synthetics, a return to the earth. Like the Jehovah's Witnesses talk about a paradise that is not on earth. We are going back to what earth really is. And when you live on the surface of the self, then you're living outside of the true earth. So the Garden of Eden, you could almost see like the true earth, and we are, it's not, this is, we, in a little while, we are going to realize that what we most want is to be out in nature, and that nature is the real, that connects, that is part of the true self. See, true self, the deeper self, transcendental is not, these are all words that belong to the false singularity. Transcending means going beyond.
Transhuman.
Yeah, transhuman, transcending. It's deepening and going inside to the true self. Yeah, so just wanted to say finally that um, no one is saying you need to follow this path, but this is in and of itself its own path. You know, it's like a professor of mine, a South African professor of mine, in Holland. He was completely his lecture he gave when he was installed. It was called Psychology in Search of Identity, because he said that psychology had become so broad, because it's in everything and everywhere, that it had lost its core. Yeah. So you have the business psychologists, they work for business. Then you have cognitive, they work in the computers. And he was saying that clinical psychology is the core, which is where Jung is. But also, this is because the psychologists and psychology has lost its identity,
Right.
and they have gone into other fields to serve other fields. But this is a little example that the work of the shadow and Jung is its own main menu. It's not a side course of the non-dual process or whatever. It is its own thing. Jung said in one of his books on the Tao, and he was said that in the future would come another psychologist, another. What he was meaning is to complete Jung's path to the higher levels, meaning that so it's not like meaning that we would have our own way. It's not that just to end, I recollect Pauli telling Jung, the great physicist, was telling Jung that he was very impressed by Jung's work, but he said Jung's psychology was epistemology, and he says, Jung, what your psychology is lacking is a family is to be adopted by a good stepfather. And he was saying that physics should adopt Jungian psychology because Jungian psychology was so close to physics. This is the problem. No, physics needed to be adopted by Jungian psychology. And it almost happened with the Pauli-Jung collaboration. And so it's not that, for instance, I'm practicing yoga or Reiki or meditation and then I use Jung.
As a side note.
Jung and the further stages that we have developed will take you back to meditation, but not that you will Jungian psychology and the shadow will be adopted by the non-dual movement. You know, that's, I think, very important, and so that it has its own identity, and psychology is not in service of other disciplines, as it were. Okay, so I wanted to just make some closing remarks to tie up all the loose ends. I just wanted to say that the point I think we've been trying to make is that this is that the work is in and of itself its own main course, and um, not only its own main course, but it's the only, in perhaps in many, many different programs that are now being used in the new age, or it is really the only tradition that is coming out of the Western journey, if you wish. Um, I've said many times that the Eastern traditions are beautiful and sacred, and that is the way we apply them that is wrong in the West to a split mind. The split mind will use it to run away from the shadow. But the only so this tradition coming out of the West you could one could say then that this teaching came to us to help us to move forward to address our specific problem. And I think the best way to so the whole idea I wanted to just also wrap up before I end with that part of the tradition is that the whole idea of touching the shadow is not, for instance, if your shadow is fear, to get to like let in the fear, but then let the fear conquer you. It is the cross is the opposite, is to let the fear in, but to keep holding on to the other side of the fear too, the opposite, which is the rage. And like that, you get like this coming together of these opposites. The whole idea is a coming together of the opposites, and to use that as a compass, a self compass to keep you on the right highway. Because if you keep the two sides together, then you get on this other frequency channel, which is what we have been calling the right timeline. So in the dream of Wilber, it's not, it's one, the monster is not the side that you need to accept at that point. You need to accept the fear that the monster is giving you, but without letting go of the other side, obviously, which is also the rage side. See, like that, you can navigate the unconscious and do the work of remembering, which is what it's all about, the retrieving of cut off memories which are cut off because of trauma, without get without getting lost again in it. So when you feel, for instance, that the one day you will wake up feeling that you cannot do it, that's when you're in the yin, and then you need to accept that, but hold on to the other side, which is the more confident side, and that does see that it's possible. The next day you or the next few hours you will swing to the other where you feel it's when you become too cocky. And then you need to hold on to the fear, which is a side that says, maybe, I'm actually not so, I'm a little bit afraid. That's why I'm becoming overly confident. So it's really a high wire walk to be able to carry the opposites in ho and in union, which is always in the beginning difficult because there will be, it's like a confrontation of extremes. And I've explained that the other track is the oxymoron, where you reject the opposite to the point where you actually, this is what I call the fake enlightenment, where you have both poles at the same time in you also, but in exclusion of each other. So then you have the slave, which is at the same time a serial killer, the mask, and the Cinderella that is under a spell of obedience, the mask which is totally uninhibited, and the Cinderella which is totally obedient. And that is the that gives that also takes us really to the what you would then call the capstone of the Illuminati pyramid, which is, and this is the word Illuminati is enlightenment, illuminedness, which is their way to reach the enlightenment, but it's a way based on cutting off of the shadow. You see, this is the two timelines. This is also why you see then the cross pointing up and the cross pointing down. It's no coincidence that the Catholic Church has been caught in mass pedophilia, sexual scandals, abuse, of rackets and corruption and stealing the money from the poor. It's very obvious that the amount of riches that they have amassed at the cost of the poor, because this is where has become, like, if you wish, a synagogue of the anti movement going down. So the more you, I just wanted to say that, and I wanted to say about the work that we are stressing on the purity of it and the dedication to it in and of itself, because not that you need any, there is no degree anymore that you will get that is really pure. It's all, I call it, it's all Promethean. European psychology was supposed to be to endorse Jung as the collective European psychology. That Jung had to become the European psychology, and it was not accepted the same way as Jesus was not accepted. But so now what you find in all areas of science is just technology. So psychology, as my professor in Holland said, so South African professor called Len Holstock, he said that psychology had lost its identity, and he was who introduced me to Jung. And he was from South Africa, a white South African, but more African than any other African you will ever find. And he was connected to Africa and the Mother Earth, and this is why he understood. He introduced me to Jung, and this is why I just wanted to say this, that the in alchemy there's a concept called the catena aurea, the golden chain, and it's really a chain connecting men and women throughout history who have been, one could call it, the bearers or the custodians of the tradition, of the real knowledge. Then you obviously the opposite side will also have the same thing, but in the inverse, and they would call it the secret knowledge, and this is why in Masonry you have this idea of the secret knowledge being passed down through the ages. Alice Bailey and these people, but in the right tradition, then you have just that this tradition would be passed down. So this is not something you can get in a university as a dissertation or a degree, but it is a initiation process, and you would get people like Goethe, Yeats, Blake, Jung. These would be like the men and the women from France who then became bearers of the golden chain. And I just wanted to read a little piece on the internet. It says here, "Thus one cannot be taught the tradition. For example, as part of a university curriculum, one can only be initiated into it. Simply finding out for oneself can be like a quest or an act of initiation." The point is that you get the catena aurea is then these, Jung was then one of them that could then help others to find it. But it's thus a sacred thing, and I have had dreams of meeting Jung and of if you wish, in a way, becoming like the bearer of this. I almost met Marie-Louise from France personally, and I think that history was almost like setting up this meeting. A very close friend of mine in Holland who was in analysis by von Franz, who is the successor of Jung. She gave him the permission to publish Pauli's and Jung's correspondence and dreams, and he actually wrote a book, published that in a book, and then he set up a meeting in Holland, and she was to come, but I am sure that was almost like synchronistically set up to meet her, but she got ill. And then I felt very bad after that because I thought, but this process doesn't happen necessarily outside of the dreams. But but when she died, I dreamt the night that she died that I was there with her, dying with her people. And then she was the topic was about succession. And I didn't even know she died. As afterwards, this friend of mine shared with me that that was the very night she died, that I had that dream that I was there with her while she was dying. And then I just wanted to say that, so I believe that this thing is transferred from one generation to the next in terms of this golden chain. And this is why if your intentions are wrong, not right, you will not get into this. This is almost like an initiation. And we have contact in the dreams with the Sophia herself. Like the dreams show that she is the directrix of this school, of which we may work for. I mean, it's not like anybody is running this. And so the point is that, and then I had many dreams with Jung, and he would appear, and the dreams would say that he was working with me on these projects. And so I believe that I am part of this succession, and that this doesn't happen. No institute, as it were, has the power to confer that onto you. You know what I mean? This golden chain are people that keep the watch on the sacred tradition, which is almost like saying that they keep the connection with the creator, the source, while we are down here in the cave. So this is why what I'm trying to say is that one, that we need to be very careful how we use this, and two, that it's a sacred tradition, very much in terms of the Eastern tradition, in which from one guru to the next, this sacred tradition is passed down. And it's too sacred to just put it in a book, in a curriculum, or in anything. It has to go from, only the individual can carry the light, for real. It's like almost like the Muslim tradition of the people that memorize the Quran. So this is from only people can contain that, not a book. It's almost like an oral tradition, yes. The way in the Islam you have this oral tradition that every generation you have so many people that memorize it, so that nobody can forge it, or change it, or fake it. This is why it really doesn't matter that the Catholic Church co-opted it, because that was not the way it would be passed down. If you read from Jesus, which we very, very clearly can reconstruct, that these teachings were all about the shadow. From then on, it was passed on from generation to generation via this inner transfer of the light, which is then called this golden chain. And everybody throughout history is a little piece in that chain. But so yes, I don't know. That's a little bit what I wanted to finish with, and I just wanted to say that I really, if you look good, in my role in this is really not a big role, because all I have been initiated into is to really see how this work, the touching of the shadow really works. And it's just basically what I do is I help people to do the work to understand their dreams, but their dreams show them the way. You understand? So I have not, I really have a very limited role in the sense that my role is to help you to hook up to your shadow and then yourself, and that is what guides you. And we know that the people that have reached self, and also those that are trying, so at some level connect to this school that we are like run part of, in which the Sophia is the directrix. So what I tell a lot of people is that you, when you start to realize who you really are, um, it becomes very much a surrendering to things that you see that you are doing in your dreams that you don't even believe you can do, and entering ever more this bigger program, this bigger purpose or vision, that is. And the beauty of it is that if some one individual would have to orchestrate all of that, it would become like as mechanical as the false timeline. But this is something that really flows. It's synchronistic. It's a synchronistic thing because it's these meaningful connections that are laid out in the dreams, and it's by constantly finding these clues. It's a quest, and we just able to maybe follow that quest, and but it's not like nobody owns that. It's the purpose of creation. Just wanted to state that.
Thank you for sharing those words. Very interesting that you I get from it partly is that the light is not outside. You gotta find it inside of you, and it's not nothing else. That's just it. It's not you gotta carry light to other people. No, you will become it, and things will evolve after that. It's not like some leader thing or some school or you gotta people have to initiate in some kind of process. Process is inside, light is inside. So thank you.
Yes, and let me just say that exact in those terms. It's not some big complicated graph or matrix, or it's simple. It's not. The moment you get more than 2 3 variables, you lose people. The moment something becomes too intellectual, it's really because they're lost. But this is just the simple process of connecting the opposites, meaning the unity. It's love. It's just an act of getting an incredible sensitivity for the power and the awareness to connect the opposites. So every day you're going to just look at yourself and you self-observe. It's just self-observing and seeing how your opposites are manifesting and bringing that together, and that just opens the door for the synchronicity, the miracle. So it's not an intellectual effort of there's so many stages and so many. There is a stairway, but the stairway is that the moment you connect your yin and your yang within and then without, then you open up a flow which is miraculous. Actually, you need to get out of the way. In the sense that the right formulation is that the self will find you. And the whole problem is that you need to get out of the way, and then it's everything really becomes more and more effortlessly, and more powered by belief in your vision. So it's not like this. It doesn't become a theory of everything or a mathematical equation. It's just every day then by connecting the opposites, you start going back to real nature, real earth. Like in my case, I more and more have the need to be outside in nature, jogging, for instance. That's like a stupid little example, but the idea is that you start to notice changes in yourself. You start to notice also that you're able to keep those opposites together in a more effective way. Normally, you would be hijacked by these opposites, and you start to feel more love. I think that's the whole thing. Love means you start. So the whole idea of singularity and all of the way they bring it with this technical thing, and no, what you start of the singularity is love, and you start to see and feel a oneness with everything. That's singularity. It's not some cyber acrobatics. It's just you start to feel incredible love for life. That's the sign of enlightenment. Not. And then you start to see that you start to realize that you're re-entering this paradise right here. The other day, when you leaned over towards me, I saw a little golden droplet of light fall on me. No, so it's seriously. This is so I in the past I also shared that you see these sparks and you see the light, and so the light, it will just keep getting more and more light, real light around you. But we need to see this, that it's a natural, it's going back to natural processes.
Yeah, I think what is also crucial is that this is not an effort to get rid of your ego, because the process of accepting your shadow is dealing with your ego. It's not letting go of the ego and then you become one. No, because then it comes into you, this knowledge comes in the light, you connect to the light, but it's in an artificial way, so it's not authentic. If somebody is hacking your mind or in an unnatural way you are getting information that's not right, that's why you need the ego, because the ego is there to protect you, to keep you whole, and only by being whole you can evolve. That's why that's so important.
Yes, and this is why when you hear people say, you need to get your ego out of the way, they really.
Yeah, just now you said you need to get out of the way yourself.
Right.
But you don't mean get rid of your ego.
No, because when you say get the ego out of the way, what you're saying is really to open up to whatever out there.
Exactly.
And that's why you see a lot of people come to me for advice that are in these different movements. And recently a lady came by me and she said that she was in this movement, and this lady was like bringing in these light entities or whatever that they use to channel in for instance in Reiki or whatever, and she told me something in her was like blocking it, and she came to me to ask if that's good or bad, because something in her felt that maybe it's not bad. And then what we found out was that there's this natural thing in you that will block the entrance of the wrong side. But now that is sold to you like, get your ego out of the way or you're blocked and this is why it isn't working. So open yourself up. But what you're doing is opening yourself up to demons that are disguised as light beings. So these blocks, the ego is there, yes, to question and to block this process, because it's really part of your defense system, your firewall. So a lot of this new age that has this attack on the ego is really they want to break down your defense system so they have a free entrance. And the idea of getting out of the way for the self, that's obviously a whole different thing, because the whole idea is that the self is in you. You see, it's not getting out of the way so that some other masters can appear. The self is who you really are.
Yes.
And the idea of getting out of the way is not killing the ego. The idea is that you do the work on containing these opposites, feeling angry but also embracing the fear, and not letting go of the anger. And then the idea becomes that we connect to the deepest level of the self, but that level is the master within. So then you need to, so it's not people that do this, they need to learn that at a stage come, you see, a lot of this is still a stage where you're doing something, and then they want to get into the self also with this, in Dutch they call it a stappenplan, a checklist, you know, help me to let go, but then they want a manual, while the letting go is to let go of the very manual. So when we once we do enough work on the shadow, a whole new stage comes where you need to learn how to let get out of the way so that the real you can perform the miracles, and that real you doesn't have to go to some training. That real you is the one that has the knowledge. This is why it's not some intellectual effort. You will find in those that go on to reach back to paradise, what you will see is a group of people just chilling and hanging out, but and doing and just being in such an ease, so that their true self can provide the miracles.
Yeah, it's not some kind of achievement to be enlightened.
Exactly.
It's a kind of a diploma you get.
It's exactly the contrary of that.
Yeah, I think we said it before. This work with the shadow actually quiets the chatter instead of making it louder.
Exactly.
You know, and then and it makes you quiet. You don't have to like be arrogant and walk around, and you are it, you be it.
Yes, that's exactly the thing. That's one of the signs of, if you want to talk about the symptoms of ascension, true ascension, that's it. You become more relaxed, quiet. You realize that emptiness and that quiet is the gold. You um, you start to not be anymore a hostage or a refugee of your shadow, your past, because you've owned it. You start to have less urges for the addictions. Obviously that's not abstinence, absolutely not. But it's not being needy about something, which is why you can enjoy everything much more. And it's also what I said recently on my Facebook page. It's not about you. So you learn to. It's really then about letting go and being. You cannot own the moment. That's the whole thing. When the moment you try to own something,
Yeah, you corrupt
you
it.
lost it. So you learn that, and you learn more and more that you are the deepest part of your nervous system is the guide. That is the lie detector. That's the guide. That's what is your. Everything else becomes like second, like nothing. Not real. You are the one that can deep in your soul feel what is true and untrue. You don't need to. It's actually tapping then in your own unconscious. You don't need any more any expert to confirm things for you.